A pleasant good night to everyone. This is Gem FM, your technical operator for tonight. Our host, Comrade Raphael Paul from Sunset City, St. Mark's, will be hosting the show tonight again. Talking Point. Welcome everyone to Talking Point, and I must indeed say how privileged and how honored I am tonight to have Comrade NAZIM Burke, former leader of the NDC here, Minister of Finance here, and the history and the length of who he was and who he is a long list, so I'll let him do that for himself. I want to welcome you, Comrade Naz, to Gem FM, Talking Point tonight, and I will hand it right over to my friend and comrade from a different mother, from St. Mark's, Sunset City. I call him the Honorable, Pablo. Good night to you, Pablo. Welcome. Your show.
Hello, thank you very much, Brother John, and it's a pleasure to be able to say a very warm welcome and good evening to Mr. NAZIM Burke. Welcome to the Gem FM and to the Talking Point for the very first time. Good evening and welcome to you, sir.
Good evening, sir, and thank you very much. Good evening to you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here, joining a very distinguished group of men. Thank you.
Yes.
A very distinguished group of men. Well, there is a very distinguished gentleman that should be joining us anytime shortly. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that he isn't here as yet. You know. Yes. So the pleasure. It's really a pleasure to have you here and to be able to say once again good evening and welcome to our viewers, our listeners, our our regulars, and we are here with Brother NAZIM Burke for the very first time on Gem FM. Mr. Burke, tomorrow is Mother's Day. I don't think you need any extensive introductions, as some of us lesser morals and some of us lesser knowns, as some of us lesser knowns do. You know, I think every Grenadian what his salt knows who NAZIM Burke is. So tomorrow is Mother's Day, Mr. Burke. Any special words that you want to share with us on the Mother's Day? We want to start at this juncture.
Yes, well, I am grateful to you, you gentlemen, for the opportunity to extend a very warm and happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there. I was saying earlier today when I spoke with someone else that our mothers are really the cradle of humanity. You know, they're the ones who experience the initial discomfort of pregnancy with all its nausea and so on in the first trimester. They're the ones who carry the load of the baby for 9 months, you know, the discomfort, sometimes the pain that is associated with it. They're the ones who experience labor, the pangs of labor and birth. And they're the ones who are charged with the responsibility to nurse the babies and, you know, ensure their health in the early period of their lives. So they have a responsibility which us, you know, we as men do not really experience and do not have the pleasure really of knowing. And it is a special place. They play that central role in our humanity. And I think we should always, all of us as men, women, and children, should acknowledge this, recognize it, and celebrate motherhood. I am very fortunate, Pablo and Calliste, to have my mother still alive. You know, she's 89 years old. If all goes well, on the 28th of October, she'll be 90. And I'm happy to say she lives alone. She cooks, she bakes, she washes, she goes to the beach in the morning and faces the cold water at 6 o'clock. You know, it's an amazing woman. And I am very happy that I have the opportunity to say that. I extend a special Mother's Day wish to her and to all our mothers out there, wherever you are, here in Grenada, here in the metropole, in the diaspora, wherever you are. I want to say a very happy Mother's Day to you, each and every one of you, and may God bless you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Burke. Well, you are known, as we said earlier on, you're an attorney. You have served, as Brother John indicated, in government. You were the Minister of Finance during the NDC's administration of 2008 to 2013. To 2013, you led the NDC into general elections in 2018. And soon after that, you resigned as the leader of the NDC. We are now in 2021. What has Mr. NAZIM Burke been up to in the interim?
In the last 3 years or so, I have given a lot of my time to the practice of law. Although I was engaged in practice while I was in opposition and leading the party, it was really difficult to carry the law in a very serious way. I mean, the politics took priority, frankly speaking. And having stepped aside and given my love for the law, I sort of got myself back into it, and I'm enjoying it, actually. So I spend a lot of time working in the law at the moment, and that is how I've been using most of my time. In the community, I continue to do the little that I could to assist those who are in need and who I can help, visit those who I can visit, but much less so than I had been doing while I was more politically active.
Speaking of being involved with the law, with legal matters, we see that there's been a report of a victory that you had with a particular case that involved the government. And do you want to tell us a little bit about that? What did that case entail? Because much was made about it. There were banner headlines out there about NAZIM Burke's victory against the government.
Well, this was a constitutional case, yeah? A person a Pakistani gentleman who got married to a Grenadian woman, and by virtue of his marriage to the Grenadian woman, was entitled to apply for and register as a Grenadian citizen. He made application, and for close to 2 years, the government would not answer his application. And finally, when his lawyers wrote to the government saying, well, with him having been married, you are required by law to register him as a citizen, the government then said that they had reason to believe that he was a terrorist, and that on national security grounds, they were going to deport him from the country. So he brought action to stop the government from deporting him. They deported him anyway. And so, our firm took an appeal. Well, first of all, took the matter to court, and at the lower levels, the court felt that the government was entitled to do what they did, and so the matter was taken to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal then ruled, let me take that back. The Court of Appeal ruled, the trial court ruled in his favor. The government then took the matter to court, saying that they felt that the trial judge was wrong in what he did, and we then had to argue the case and to try to convince the Court of Appeal that in fact the judge was completely right in his decision, and that the constitutional rights of the citizen, of the gentleman, had been violated, and that he should be brought back to Grenada, that the government should pay to bring him back from Pakistan to Grenada and pay him for his damages. And this is the appeal that we brought before the Court of Appeal, and they agreed with us. and made an order that the gentleman must be brought back, get back here, and $50,000 by way of damages for him for what had been done to him. So, but it raises a question there of excessive behavior by government, disregard or disrespect for constitutional rights of the citizen, the right to be treated fairly, the right of access to the courts, the right to be heard. In Muslim culture, there are many Mohammeds. In Muslim religion, there are many Mohammeds and many people with the same names. And if you come and you say, well, I saw that John Paul is a terrorist, at least ask the guy if he's the John Paul they're talking about, because there are many John Pauls. And if the guy says, listen, I'm not the guy, give me a chance to explain. I live in a village where there are 6 John Pauls that I know, that I can show you. And if you check the birth records in my village, you will see that there are 6. If you go to the registry there, you'll see there's 6 John Pauls. I'm not the guy. But give me a chance to explain that to you. Don't just pick me up and ship me out. So the right to be heard before a decision is made about you, the right to be given a hearing and to explain is a very important constitutional right, and is a right to fairness. There's a common law right and there's a constitutional right. And so what the court said was, you can't treat people in this way. It's wrong. And this happens time and again. As a matter of fact, just yesterday we had a ruling on another case in which a permanent secretary was that had held a position for 18 months in an acting position. The government essentially came one day and just said, well, we're terminating that arrangement and you're going back to your original position without any explanation, without giving her a chance to understand what she did wrong or where she went wrong or why she's not been kept in the position. And we took the matter to court, and yesterday the court pronounced as well that what was done to her was unconstitutional. That judgment, I suppose, is going to be released within the next couple of days.
I want to get back to that and the whole issue of this arbitrary and excessive infringements. But before I do, we also saw during that period a report which said NAZIM BURKE attacks the new today, and that was in August of last year. And you are alleged to have labeled whatever it is that was said as being deceitful and disgusting. What was the outcome of that episode?
Well, after further consideration, we decided to just leave that alone. Yeah. Okay. Because, you don't want to spend all your time fighting battles that really, at the end of the day, does not advance the cause of Grenada. Whatever energy I have left in me, whatever I want to use it for my family and to help the country where I could. I don't want to be fighting Pablo. I don't want to be fighting George Worm. I don't want to be fighting anybody else. As I told another lawyer a couple of days ago, it is not my practice to engage in unpleasant exchanges. I don't find them productive. I don't find them healthy, and it just disturbs my spirit. It just disturbs my spirit. So, I blew and expressed how I felt about it because I felt it was wrong, but that's the end of the matter.
Okay. Returning to the whole issue of fundamental rights and, this constitutional infringements, we saw that in her pronouncement when the judgment was delivered from the Court of Appeal. We saw Justice Louis Esther Blenman. She said, quote, "The protection of fundamental rights against arbitrary and excessive infringements is an essential feature of constitutional governments. We live within a constitutional framework. We have constitutional democracy." Have we found, or is there a situation where we have an ongoing incidents, or we have ongoing incidents of constitutional infringements? And if so, Can you share with us on that issue?
Yes, well, one of them that we just spoke about is exactly that. You know, so you have matters where the Constitution says you can't take somebody's property away from them, and then the government takes the property from them and does not compensate them immediately, or they acquire lands, or they build a bridge, or the bridge in fact is on part of somebody's private land, and nobody discusses how are you going to compensate me. You know, there are issues concerning the right to a fair trial. You know, the courts, the law, the Constitution says if you're going to charge somebody, you must give them the right to have a lawyer of their choice. You must give them the opportunity for a fair trial, and that trial must be conducted within a reasonable period of time.
Brother, your mic is now muted. Your mic is muted.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Okay, right.
Right. So these are things which the government has to regard. The freedom of association, the right of people to get together and associate. Yeah. You know, there have been concerns expressed recently about the teacher strike, for example, and the presence of military personnel on the site. What was the reason for that? Was it intended to be intimidation? Are they trying to discourage or to dissuade or to prevent in any way these persons from exercising that constitutional right of association or freedom to associate? These are issues which are all guaranteed in the Constitution, and these rights that we speak about are generally regarded as inalienable, meaning essentially that you're born with those. They can't take those away from you, and nobody can give them to you, and nobody can take them from you. What the Constitution does is guarantee those rights so that the citizen cannot be deprived of those rights by the government. And that is why the Constitution in our democracy has what is called the Supremacy Clause, a provision in it that says any law that the government passes, any act that the government does, as long as it contradicts any one of the provisions of the Constitution, then that law is not enforceable, is null and void and of no effect, and the citizen has no duty to obey it. So these are things which, you know, in every democracy, we have to be concerned about, because the government is there to govern. It is there to, it may pass laws for the good governance of the country, but those laws must conform to the constitutional limits that are set. So, you know, those rights are important. And I think it is very important for all citizens to understand their rights so that they can take action when those rights are violated.
When those rights are violated. Speaking of the violation of rights, you speak to different people and on different occasions, whether it's people posting on social media, people on other radio programs, workers, and we hear it being mentioned, the whole issue of intimidation and victimization by the ruling administration. Have you found that to be the case in your constituency, or has such accusation or such allegations crossed your path?
I hear them all the time. Yes, I mean, and, you know, remember, this is not a new allegation. This is not a new complaint. This is something that has been said for years. And so I've heard them before while I was much more active. I still hear them today. People are concerned that there is a culture of fear, a culture of intimidation, an unspoken word that if you jump out of line, you're going to pay the price, which, you know, is common in societies that have despotic governments. That is the practice. Despots rule by a system of reward and punishment. That is the essence of the political strategy, reward and punishment, so that those who do something that finds favor with the ruler is rewarded, and those who do something which does not find favor with the ruler is punished, so that the one who is punished knows that if I have to get a reward next time, or I have to be favored next time, I have to stay in line. The one who is rewarded knows that if I ever go the other way, I'm going to be punished, so that I have to stay the course. Yeah, and these things are unspoken. They're very subtle. They're very, in some ways, they happen without you realizing it. For example, if let's say a mother has a single mother. She has 4 children. The oldest daughter has now turned 18, and she's finished school. She got a few CXCs, but she doesn't have a job. She applies and she gets a position as a warden or as an Imani worker, and she's collecting $1,500 a month. Yes, until she actually starts working, that is a promise. But once she gets the job and starts working and gets that first $1,500 check, you can be absolutely certain that she does not want to lose that $1,500. All right, she knows that I've gotten this one. If I do what I'm supposed to do, I'll get the next one next month. And so I can help to pay the utility bill, the electricity bill at home. I can buy something for my younger sister or brother. If I want to do a little thing with my hair, I can do it, so that they understand that they have to behave in a certain way and do certain things to get that money next month. It means, therefore, that if that person recognizes that being seen talking to Pablo will lead to a problem, that somebody is going to go and say, well, I saw her mother talking to Pablo, and there's a risk that she's going to lose that $1,500, then of course she would not want to be seen talking to Pablo. So it creates a culture where people feel uncertain, people feel insecure, and that culture is one of reward and punishment, and it's very present.
We see that Brother Delbert has joined us. Let me give Delbert the opportunity to say good evening. Welcome to you, Delbert. Welcome to the panel talking point for this evening.
Good evening. Good evening. How are you doing, Pablo?
Yes, I'm good.
Naz, great to see you on the program. Welcome to Gem FM.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Pablo, I had to take some time. That program, I don't want to get off track, but that program this afternoon was just took Gem FM to another level, so I just wanted to say that. Listen, I've just joined in. I want to kind of get into the conversation. I'm hearing Brother Naz talk about the issue of fear and intimidation and all things that we have sort of spoken about already. So I'm just going to want to listen in a little bit and sort of get warmed up into the conversation, and hopefully I'll be able to contribute, ask a few more questions later on down the road. But I'm looking forward to a really, really good conversation.
Yeah, well, actually, as you know, that's all we do on Gem FM. We have good conversations.
That's true.
every occasion, it's a good conversation.
Yeah.
Speaking of all that you've mentioned just a while ago, Mr. Burke, what's your take, therefore, because you did reference the teachers and the whole issue of the paramilitary forces being called out for the demonstrations of the workers and so. What's your take on the present industrial situation between government and the workers?
Well, I think it's a very unfortunate situation, because what has essentially happened here is that trust has broken down. And it is sad, because I think that what we are seeing is, in a sense, an immature response to a genuine problem, right? In 2008, the government, just before the general elections, the government, the new National Party government at that time, committed to paying increases in increments to the workers if they won the elections, but they signed an agreement. They did not win the elections, but that agreement was signed, and the new government, the NDC administration, was therefore required by law to comply with that agreement and to make the payments, and we paid it. In spite of the fact that Grenada was going through one of the worst economic crises in its history. We paid it. In 2018, just before the general elections, the government gave the unions the assurance that they were going to fix the burning pension problem that has existed in Grenada for a long time. You know of that problem. As you know, the Pension Disqualification Act that was passed back in 1983, there have been a number of concerns about the way it may have deprived public servants of their pensions, their constitutional right to their pension. And this has been a sore point for public workers for years. Succeeding governments, in fact, have failed to address this issue in a satisfactory way. The government campaigned that they were going to fix this problem. And just before the general elections, they signed a memorandum of understanding with the workers saying they will fix that problem. They have abandoned, it seems, they have abandoned that idea, and nothing has happened there. They negotiated to pay an increment in salaries for the workers now in 2021, January of 2021. That has not happened. And the government has responded simply by saying, well, we can't pay it. We don't have it, yeah? Now, I don't know if the government has it. And many persons have already raised concerns. Well, if you don't have the money, where did you find money to pay for Grenlec? Where are you finding money to spend $30 million today on the repair or upgrade of the traffic lights in Grenada, the 3 or 4 traffic lights we have in Grenada, right? If you have $30 million to spend right now, would you spend it on repairing traffic lights at a time when you already have literally hundreds, perhaps thousands, I don't know the exact number, of wardens, traffic wardens that are doing a good job? You have the policemen, traffic policemen and so on working. They are doing a wonderful job, right? Are you going to spend $30,000 right now to fix traffic lights or upgrade traffic lights when the teachers and the public servants are saying, well, give us what is due to us? Yeah. So, you know, I heard the Prime Minister speaking the other day. He said, well, the $5,000 we give into Otway and so on is neither here nor there, and that cannot pay the millions that workers have to get. That is absolutely true. At the same time, it's about the optics. It's about the signal that you're sending. It's about the symbol that you're holding out. Yeah. You're saying that there are some things that no matter how frivolous they may be, no matter how insignificant they may be, you consider those things as priorities. And I can't understand why that is so, because the issue here is not just about paying the workers that money. Yeah. The government says, we are going to, I think I heard the Prime Minister to say the other day, he was considering, or his government was giving consideration to introducing a new stimulus package to the tune of about $9 million. Now, what he's trying to do is to stimulate the economy, to inject, to give it a boost and get it going. But the monies that are owed to the teachers can itself be a stimulus and can be integrated into some kind of stimulus package. Yes? If the will is there, a way will be found. And I think what has happened here is that trust has broken down, that because of the way the government is treating with it, the workers have now reached a point that they believe that what they're dealing with is high-handedness and a lack of commitment, really, to find a genuine solution. And it's coming across more as the exercise of authority. The right to say, I'm in charge and I can do what I say goes, rather than realizing that these workers, the economy stands to benefit. You see, if you're talking about economic recovery at this time and you want to stimulate the economy and you want to give the economy a boost, finding a way to integrate your stimulus program with the payment of the workers and the satisfaction of the contractual rights would make a lot of sense for the government. Would be a win-win situation. And I don't understand why this has been handled in this way. In fact, if I were the Prime Minister today, I would not leave that in the hands of anybody else. I, as Prime Minister, will take responsibility for that. And I will sit down personally with the unions and say, listen, guys, let's sit down and talk about this. How can we find a solution? I can't give you everything up front, but let's do X, let's do Y. By September, I'm going to do this. By December, I'm going to do that. And let's move the thing because we need everybody on board. Trust is the foundation of cohesion. Trust is the foundation of cooperation. Trust is the foundation of coordination. And if the government is really going to mobilize the energies of the nation to embark on this road of recovery that the Prime Minister is talking about, he must enter into some kind of arrangement with the workers, with the public workers and the teachers. It seems to me that it's a matter of strategic necessity, not just a case of the exercise of authority, because it addresses a much wider issue, programmatic issue, than simply paying the workers their money.
Speaking about all of that, and you did mention, the projects that government is giving preference, like the traffic lights, rather than to pay the workers their money. We see that government is also getting into a number of other projects, mega hotels and so on. And we heard recently the announcement by, well, I don't know whether it was announcement or proposal by a foreign investor regarding the privatization of the airport and so. And it appears that with every waking moment, there is an issue that creates some kind of political tension and uncertainty in the country. What's your take on the overall political environment as it exists in the country at this point in time?
Well, I would consider it tense, and unnecessarily tense. It is tense on its own weight, in the sense that COVID has created a certain amount of anxiety, a certain amount of stress, a certain amount of uncertainty. So that is there regardless. But I think what we are finding now is that on that objective condition is being superimposed an unnecessary and subjective display of authority. And this authority is coming, you see, from the fact that you have a government that has really, frankly speaking, no real opposition in the parliament or elsewhere, right? It's the exercise of authority. It's the exercise of authority that borders on the abuse of authority, yeah? So I'm in charge. You put me there. You give me everything, so I'm using it, I'm taking it, yeah? So the government then, the checks and balances that would normally be present when a government acts is not there. The government is acting with impunity because there's really nobody to fight them down, you see? And it's unfortunate because, every system needs some kind of check. Could you imagine the United States with Donald Trump if there was nobody there to resist? The thing may have gone, the thing may have been completely destroyed. The state may have collapsed, you see? And I'm saying this frankly, the state may have collapsed because you need to have somebody who is saying, no, you can't do that. It's not right. That's really what you need, somebody there saying, no, you can't do that. That's not right. That's not fair. That's not reasonable. Keeping a check on a limit on what can and cannot be done. And I think we find ourselves in a position where, guys are boasting, we do this 3 times, 15 zip, and so on. And, nobody should tell us anything. You put us there. So I think it is a wake-up call for our people to understand that you vote for who you want, yes, but you also have to vote wisely. because at the end of the day, you can end up paying a price for what you decide. You see. Now, the climate that we're speaking about, it finds expression in the labor movement. It finds expression even in COVID, where people are saying, well, listen, it's double standards are going on. You doing this and you're telling me don't do this, but you doing that, and people are frustrated. And then, of course, superimposed on that is a situation where a lot of people are hurting. A lot of people who work, especially in the tourism sector, the hotel workers, the taxi drivers, the tour operators, that whole group of workers who rely so heavily on tourism to live, to survive, they're hurting. And, the government gave a little something at the very beginning, but $300 can't do the trick for 6 months. So it's a very tense period. It's a very difficult period. And I think you're seeing some of that finding expression in anger, right? A lot of the acts of violence that you're seeing may be related to frustration, fights. Some guy bite off another guy's lip in Willis the other day over gambling. I think somebody said it was $10, so somebody's hospitalized. And then, you don't want that. So it's really important in this period that our leaders be understanding, be tolerant, be sensitive to the realities that we are confronted with, and offer the kind of leadership that would be needed to take us out of this very difficult situation.
Before I bring in Delbert right after this question, I want to get from you, based on a comment that you just made about the people. The people have given the mandate to Dr. Mitchell. He's won 15 seats, so we feel that he can do as he wishes, and that we need a different mindset from our voters and from our people going forward. People need to take stock of what's happening. What do you think, or what kind of adjustment do you think is required from our people and from our voters to take this administration and any administration forthcoming, to task on issues of governance?
Well, I would answer your question this way. Because my wife is from Barbados, I follow a lot of the events, not because of that, but I've always followed the politics in the Caribbean, but I tend to follow a lot of what's going on in Barbados as well as Grenada, yeah? And it is very refreshing to see people on social media and elsewhere, right, would say something like this: Mia, we love you. We are good. You're one of the best prime ministers we've ever had. We love you. But what you're doing right now is SHIT. On this particular thing you're doing here is SHIT, yeah? And they will say it loud and clear. They will curse. They'll use the F word, right, in the replies, yeah? And then tomorrow, when she does something that's really, really nice, they go right back and they praise her, they endorse her, and they say, we love you again, yeah? In other words, they are able, in Barbados, they are able to distinguish between the leader and her behavior. They are able to distinguish between her conduct on a particular event and the support for the party. So it is not a unconditional support. No matter what you do is yes. It's not a cult. They have the ability to love her, to embrace her, to praise her when she does good things, but to also criticize her very sternly when she does what is judged not to be in the interest of the people. And that is really where we need to get. We need to be able to say, yes, I support this particular party, but this is wrong. One of the times I saw this happen here in Grenada, which also was very refreshing, was on the Camohon issue, Camohon Park. I remember going down to Camohon Park and seeing some very strong NNP supporters And I would just, just taunt them jokingly and say, well, you join us, and they'll say something to me like, well, listen, I NNP, but I'm saying no to this one. Come Park is not for sale, and it was refreshing to see that. It's that kind of distinction that we have to make. Yeah. That is really that's the adjustment. I answer you in that way. That's the kind of adjustment I think we need.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brother Delbert.
Yes. Yeah. I'm finding it. I actually tonight have to make notes because I'm in agreement with so I'm finding it hard to come up with some questions. But I want to take you back a little bit, Naz. How and I don't think this is a far-fetched question. What grade would you give the government for the handling of the COVID response or the COVID pandemic or the disaster? We did not suffer massive amount of debt, but what grade would you give the government for that response? And despite the fact that we seem, in terms of body count, to have come out or is going to come out of it in good shape, as you indicated in some of your comments, there are some deep underlying issues that's going to sort of reveal itself post-COVID that I think the government has not addressed or is not addressing appropriately. How would you grade the overall response?
With the handling of the COVID itself, from a health perspective, I would give them an 80. Somewhere between 80 and 85. I thought that, I still do believe that the government handled the health component of that crisis very, very well. Yeah. Okay. They acted in a timely way, first of all. The shutdowns were early. And I think it placed us in a position where, we shut down even before we had a case. Yeah. And that was good. They engaged and they partnered with all of the other Caribbean players and acted in unison with them. And I think that too was important. And the system, for the most part, worked. They were consistent in the reporting and the press conferences, keeping the population up to date as events occurred. There were slips here and there. I remember one guy slipped out of town, left quarantine and went back to England on a plane, not telling anybody anything, Yeah. And he slipped out. So, but in situations like this, you will find some events that is what will take. That's why you would not give 100% in that course. But I'm saying overall, I thought that they managed it well. There were times when some of our citizens felt that they were a little bit too heavy-handed about it. But I think it was necessary to be tough because you see, whereas the bigger countries can say, well, all right, if something happens, you'll go to the hospital and so on. We know that if a health crisis broke out here, we don't have the means. I don't know how many respirators we have on the island. I don't know how many ventilators we have on the island, right? I know that we have over 2 or 3 intensive care beds in the hospital. Right? If 10 people got sick at once, you wouldn't have 10 beds to be able to hold them. So this is a very, and I'm not saying that out of any condemnation or blame to the government. I'm just saying the health system itself is so fragile that you just cannot afford to have that kind of problem. And I believe that they sent some signals early. A couple came here, a doctor and his wife came here and went to 2 or 3 restaurants. Breaking the regulations, as I understood it, that person was charged, In other words, they did the things that ought to have been done. And I think we are better for it. Okay. The issues that have to be addressed now are the economics of COVID and the social component of COVID.
So I have a few questions on that, but I want to even take you back again to a comment that you made, and you talked about us being a democratic nation and respect for the Constitution and so forth. Can our Constitution seriously be considered a democratic constitution when it doesn't guarantee minority representation in our parliament?
Well, again, I mean, there is always room for change and improvement. Yeah, this is a 1974 instrument, and it is a live document, or is intended to be a live document, meaning that it has served us well so far, but in the course of our years, we have seen it has been tested on many occasions, and we have seen the need for change. We have seen the needs for revision. We have seen the need for improvement. The problem is that the last attempt to do it, there have been 4 attempts to do it already. The last one was not handled very well, and but it is necessary. So I wouldn't say that because it does not have that provision, it is not a democratic document. But the point is, you always have to be working on building and improving it so as to make it better, so as to bring it in greater alignment with the needs and aspirations of the nation.
Okay. So I want to go back to the development agenda. What do you, and I know you spoke about. I'm in total agreement with you in terms of how the payment should have been handled. The issue of the 4%, and as you say that you're not fully aware of exactly how the money issue is with the government, but because so many other decisions were made where they seem to be sort of spending willy-nilly, it gave the teachers and other workers the belief that there's money somewhere and that the government should pay. And very early on GEM FM, we noted that a payment like that could act as a stimulus for the economy. But given the Grenadian economy was challenged before COVID, and the full effects that COVID will have on the economy is probably not yet known, or not yet seen, or not yet felt by our people. If you had an opportunity to, let's say, solve on a committee or make some recommendations to the government in terms of where the focus should be now, in terms of not just getting us back to normal, but building a new normal, building a new construct that really seeks to shift some of the wealth and benefit of the nation to the people who are least fortunate, and to come up with some kind of agenda that would grow the economy both from the ground up and from the inside out. What would you recommend?
Well, before you make the recommendation, you always have to know what is the state of things. Before the doctor tells you this is what I'm prescribing, he must do some kind of diagnosis, or she must do some kind of diagnosis, you know?
Yes.
So it's important for us to understand where things are. And, you know, I think we must start with that. And I will come to the more directly to the aspect that you're asking me, but I think we need to ask ourselves, where are we today?
Yeah.
You know, COVID has changed the world, right? There's no doubt about that. It came at a time when our planet was already facing an existential threat. And we were already confronted with what has been called a climate emergency. Yeah. So the intersection of these two sets of circumstances, the existential threat of climate change and COVID, has challenged us as never before. And, you know, whereas we have been sick in the past, as I've said on another occasion, we've been sick in the past. This is the first time that we have been sick and the house is on fire at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So resources that would otherwise have been used to deal with climate change and to deal with other things now have to be diverted to go towards fighting COVID. Yeah. And this puts us in a very difficult situation, because this combination of things means that we must revisit how we are going to manage the economy. Yeah. In general, we're facing what I would consider to be a qualitatively new situation. Yeah, not just in Grenada, but in the Caribbean as a whole. We're really at a at a kind of inflection point, you know. And for the Caribbean islands, our situation is even worse than just climate change and COVID. Don't forget, these small islands all face natural disasters on a regular basis, right? Hurricanes come on us every single year. And when a hurricane hits a place like Grenada, it's not the same as when a hurricane hit the United States. When something hit New Orleans, right, they take supplies from California and bring it over. They take supplies from New York and bring it over, yeah? When something hits Grenada, it hits the entire country, and the whole place is destroyed in an hour and a half. Yeah. So hurricanes have their impact. Volcanic eruptions have their impact. We just saw what happened in St. Vincent. And the associated risk that goes with that, tsunamis, yeah? Earthquakes is a regular thing in the Caribbean, flash floods, landslides, and the risk of rising sea levels. All of these things have to be combined with climate change. All of these things have to be combined with COVID as you ask yourself, where do we go? Given our small size, the consequences of these kinds of events are far greater for us than they will be for a large country, right? And we are having these events every year. The economic model by which we have lived in the past has placed a very heavy reliance on tourism, a heavy reliance on citizenship by investment in more recent years for capital expansion and for job creation and for government revenues. Given the seasonal and vulnerable nature that we are now seeing of tourism, of citizenship by investment, and how and of course, COVID, we can see how when things happen in the larger countries, how terribly they impact on us in these parts. And it tells us, therefore, that we have to revisit our model and ask ourselves the question, can we afford to be so dependent on tourism? Can we afford to be so dependent on citizenship by investment? Can we put ourselves in a position where government revenues depend on it, job creation depends on it, capital expansion depends on it, and we know that overnight, the whole thing can change for us. The model that we have worked on in the past, especially in the last 20, 30, 40 years, relegates agriculture to the background and related economic activities, including agro-processing and so. It relegates them to a secondary role where people are basically engaged in that activity in a largely unplanned, unregulated, unsupervised way, and left almost entirely to the initiative of individuals. You say, I'm going and plant some tomatoes, yeah? It doesn't matter, you planting tomatoes because you feel like planting tomatoes and you think, well, that is the crop I like to plant, right? It doesn't matter what the country needs at that particular moment. There's no coordination to say, well, all right, you, Birch Grove gets the heaviest rains. This is the place that has the soil that will best suit Callaloo. We need Callaloo. Birch Grove will concentrate on producing Callaloo for the country. Yeah, nobody is planning that stuff in a regulated and ordered way. So it's really what individuals do. And sometimes when they do it, they cannot find market for it. Especially now in the post-COVID situation, people growing things. Where everybody go into the market and trying to sell the same things. Some stand up on the side of the road trying to sell. So agriculture has been relegated to a background. And the thing that can really make the difference for us is in a position, in second position, whereas tourism and the related CBI and so on is what been advanced. Yeah. What is the result of that? Food security is a problem. Yeah. Our foreign exchange, right? Grenada's food import bill. Grenada's food import bill, it's alone is more than 3 times the export earnings of the country. I'm not talking about oil and fuel and anything else. Grenada's food import bill is more than 3 times the export earnings, the total export earnings of the country. And you have to have foreign exchange to buy that stuff for it to come in. So it means that the consequence of this thing that we're facing is that we don't have money to finance capital programs. We have to borrow a whole set of money. We're doing so at high interest rates, and we simply do not generate the kind of revenues that are needed now to service these debts. So you're building debt upon debt upon debt. And there can be no doubt that the advent of COVID, acting in combination with this climate crisis and increases our disaster vulnerability and have compounded the threats that we are facing as a nation and the Caribbean is facing as a nation. Right? So with COVID now, the question for us is, how do we protect lives? How do we ensure that our people do not descend into poverty, right? While at the same time, getting them back to work, supporting their families, building the economy, and at the same time doing so in a sustainable, long-term way, as you were talking about. In other words, engaging in some kind of sustainable, inclusive, equitable development of the economy. That's the challenge that we're facing. How to do so in a nature positive way, because you cannot ignore climate change as you go forward. Yeah. So this is the condition, in other words, that the government has to address. You see, and so when we speak about where do we go from here, those are the issues and challenges that line up before us, and that is what the government has to be focusing on to determine what are our next steps and how do we achieve it? Not to simply say to the teachers, we're not paying. You have to sit down with the teachers now to see how that piece fits into this overall thrust that you want to take forward. Yeah. And as I reflect on it, Delbert, I think that there are 4 basic platforms that the government has to be working on. I would say 5 basic platforms that the government has to be keeping front and center in terms of going forward and rebuilding. Now, one is our land use. I treat that as one group: our land use, our ocean use, and our food and nutrition security. Right? How are we going to use the land that we have to get the most out of it? How are we going to use the oceans to get the most out of it, both in terms of food and other means? Yeah. How are we going to use the little land that we have? Grenada is 89,000 acres of land. Yeah. The entire country is 89,000 acres of land. As you know, there are farms in the United States that are much, much bigger than that. Right? Grenada is 89,000 acres of land. How are we going to use the land that we have? How are we going to use the ocean that we have? And how are we going to address this question of food and nutrition security? How do we combine these resources and objectives to get the most out of it? I see that as one big platform that the government has to be thinking about, planning for, and building on. Yeah. The second one is our infrastructure and our built environment. Yeah. The infrastructure of the country, the roads, the networks, the bridges. Yeah. We have to fix those. Do we do anything about the airport in Pearls? Can we rebuild that? Will it add value? Would we be able to use that as the basis on which we're now going to export flowers, export fruits and vegetables as part of the resuscitation of the rural economy that has been destroyed with the collapse of agriculture? What is going to be the program for the rural economy? What do we do about St. Andrew and St. Patrick? And what role can that airport play in making sure that we take the thing forward? In other words, what are the key infrastructural projects that we are going to have to engage upon, renewing our bridges and so, and what are the key buildings that we have to do? The built out environment and the infrastructure of the country is going to be crucial. We have a number of buildings that were destroyed since Hurricane Ivan that have not been rebuilt, right? Government House, is it important that we build it or not? I don't know. The old Parliament, York House, which has a historic building, can we do something about that? Yes? Should we build something there? Do we make our national archives and a library? Is that sufficiently important as part of the history and the legacy of the country? What do we do about structures like those? Do we rebuild those? Are they important? Are we going to engage the French to restore the 2 forts so that when people come, they get a history, they get a tour, they can get the little headphones and go around and listen in different languages to the history of the forts. And instead of paying $1 EC, they pay $20 US to go in there. It becomes a source of employment for people and part of the history of the country. Do we move the police from where they are up on the fort and build out a station for the police officers, and restore the fort to its historic value, restore the fort and treat it as a center of history rather than a police station. Yeah, these are issues now that we're going to have to deal with. How do we engage and deal with these issues? Yeah. So I'm saying to you, this is not just about punishing people and cussing and getting on. This is about long-term strategic priorities. Yeah. How do we deal with the infrastructure and the built-out environment, taking into account that in everything that we do, climate resilience must be important for the very reason that we identified earlier on, which is disaster vulnerability. Disaster vulnerability, yeah? And then a third issue, a third platform that we must be thinking about and building on is the generation and use of energy, right? Energy is a development issue. Energy is not just putting on your lights, it's a development issue. No country can develop unless it works out what are going to be the sources of energy that will fuel that development, right? And I think we all agree that it's not going to be fossil fuel.
Yeah.
Right? But what are the alternatives and which ones are important for us? Yeah. Is it going to be solar? Is it going to be wind? Is it going to be geothermal? We have that possibility also. Is it going to be tidal? Which ones, in what combination? How do we integrate them? Yeah? We have a single generating plant at the moment. Are we going to have independent power producers? Will we allow people to produce their electricity at home and sell to the plant? So we have a single grid that will supply electricity to everybody, right? And what the system is going to be. Is it going to be that Grenlec can sell electricity, like whatever you produce, you have to sell it to Grenlec and then buy back from Grenlec? Or do you use some of what you produce and sell the rest to Grenlec, and at what rates? All of these things will have to be regulated, yeah? But that's important because countries like these should be putting themselves in a position where not only are we finding cheaper electricity, but we're looking to deal with electric cars and so on as well.
Yeah.
You see, because that's where the world is heading. And we now have to be looking to see, can we be a model country like Singapore? Can we be a model country like Seychelles? Can we be a model country like Malta? You know, can we do things differently? Can we do things differently? Yeah, and that's going to be an important thing. The fourth platform that I'm seeing that needs to be really, really critical here is what I call personal income and social security, right? Personal income and social security. That's going to be crucial. Personal security, right? We must be caring for the aged, we must be caring for the old, we must be caring for the disabled, we must be respecting people's rights, yeah? But at the same time, people must have an income. We have to help people to plan for the retirement.
Yeah.
Right? You have to help people to prepare for the retirement, like you have with your 401k in the United States, like Canada has with the RRSP, where they force you to put some money away so that you don't depend on the government when you turn 60 or 65 and you can't work anymore. You can't even buy your medication.
Yeah.
Too many people who have worked too hard in this country are still living in poverty. And they've given 40 years, 50 years of their lives, hard labor, and now they have nothing. Many of them is people who drop some food for them, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah? So we have to address that question, and we have to address social security, right? And personal security, you know, the issue relating to rape and violence against women, violence against children. We have to address these things in a fundamental and serious way. Yeah. So these are issues which I see as a plan. That is more the sort of social plan that must be addressed. And the fifth one I'm seeing is a critical need now for the development and integration of technology into our development model. I'm not talking about just having the cell phone so you can send WhatsApp messages, right? I'm talking about how we can treat with development, with technology, not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself, as an economic sector in its own right. Yeah? So that as we try to plan out where we go, to my mind, these are the 5 pieces, these are the 5 platforms that we have to kind of address. And each of those things will require certain basic steps be taken. I believe, for example, that in the area of land use and ocean use and so, you must have a land use plan.
Yeah.
People, I mean, you know, you build a nice house in an area today. Next week, a guy come and he set up a garage with old cars pack up outside of it, right? You know, you pay $500,000 for a house, and then later on you have to sell it for $300,000 because all kind of stuff is going on there that you didn't plan for, you didn't anticipate, and the value of the place goes right down in no time at all. And nobody seems to be regulating and controlling where people set up businesses, where they run garages, how things are done, what is residential, what is commercial, what is industrial, all of these things, what is agricultural, all of these things are important. Yeah. So how you zone the country is going to be important. Yeah. And it should not take that long to do these things. Yeah. You need to have a soil map of the country. Yeah. Which are the areas that produce what kinds of things, right? You know, well, St. David, they're going to do cloves and what and what and what. They have the red soil. You know that Birch Grove gets the most rain of any particular place in the country in any given time, in any given year. And you need that for the Callaloo. That's where we're going to do that stuff. Yeah. So you have to kind of figure out where the soil is, where the rains are, and what you're going to do where. So there has to be greater planning, right? And I believe, Delbert, that it is that kind of engagement, that kind of promise that COVID provides, right? Mm-hmm. This is not about just saying, well, okay, you do a little stimulus package. It's an opportunity now to reorient ourselves, to devise a new development model, but one that mobilizes the entire nation for that effort. And that is why you cannot take this standoff position in dealing with thousands of workers, the teachers. Yeah, you need them. Yeah. Right, the public servants are going to be critical. So I believe that a different approach is needed. Yeah, yeah.
So you took away some of my questions, but I want to get back to 2 things, because I was having a private conversation only this morning with a really good friend of mine. He's a avid supporter of the NMP government, but he's a good guy. He's a good guy. We've been friends a long time, and we talk, you know, behind the scenes, and we agree on some things and we don't agree on something. So I want you to address this issue again, because there's this idea out there that in 2008 through 2013, that the NDC did not honor the that agreement that you spoke about that was made, that sort of political eve of election guarantee that the NNP administration had made, that the NDC, because it was done in the name of the government, had to honor it. Could you clarify that, whether or not increases were paid during that period?
Yes, they were paid. I mean, I don't have the numbers here with me, but I would love to. Yeah, I can tell you they were paid.
Okay, great. Because, you know, there's been a lot of lies, basically.
You know, and this is the thing, you know. What is so sad about this whole situation, Delbert, is not the lie itself. It's the fact that lies are believed so easily by so many people. You know what I mean?
Because even people who received the payment, and now because they're supporters of the party, no, we didn't receive any payment.
You know, I was reminding a friend of mine the other day that we are living in the post-truth era.
Very much so.
You know? We are living in the post-truth era, because really, truth doesn't matter anymore. I mean, millions of people believe things which are so dead wrong. Yeah. You know, I don't know what to say, but that's not true. That's not true at all. Yeah.
Pablo raised, and listen, and I think Pablo would agree with me here. So much of what you said in that 5-point sort of agenda are the issues that we have been talking about on GEM FM for the past couple months. with different gates among ourselves. So now I know that we're really not crazy, that we're onto something. But I want to go back. Pablo raised something about the airport, and the airport has become sort of a hotbed issue. So my question to you, because I got a lot of heat for it personally, because I took a sort of nuanced approach to it, is there any way a government led by NAZIM Burke would seek to put the operation of the Morris Bishop International Airport into private operation? I'm not talking about a sale. I'm talking about private operation. Is there any kind of situation that you can envision where that would be warranted, or that would be a good thing for the economy overall?
I would not want to make an absolute statement about that, to say that I will never do, because I don't like the word never, yeah? But I would not do that. My first option, my first line of action would not be that, you see? I say that because I do believe that private management of airports has been proven to be a good thing internationally. I recognize that, yeah? I mean, now some of the big airports in London are privately run, yeah? And the Spanish people in particular over the years have made a name for themselves managing airports around the world. You know, they're very good at that stuff, yeah? So I'm not making a case against private management of airports, but I'm saying to you, Grenada's situation is unique, yeah? You have one single airport. Keep that in mind. That one airport was associated with a man who was seen as, was built by or associated with a man who was seen as the emblem of the revolution, yeah? Who, in the minds of many, is the person who caused us to have the airport, yeah? And the airport has been named after him, yeah? So people see the airport as a matter of national pride, as part of the national patrimony. That's how they view it, as part of the national patrimony. They attach more significance to that than oil that we have outside it in the waters, yeah? And therefore, one has to be very sensitive to that. Anything that would appear to be giving it away to somebody else or putting it in private hands and rendering it more removed from Grenadians, would perhaps lead to a negative reaction. And I think you're seeing that already, And because it is, we have to find another way to achieve good management while retaining it. That's what we have to do. Find another way to achieve good management. So the case you're making, or the case that those people are making, is for good management of the airport. And I don't think anybody can oppose that. But the question is, can we find a way to retain management control and yet ensure that it be run properly? Because it would be an admission that it would be an admission of failure to say that locals cannot run it properly. That as long as it's in local hands, it will not be run properly. And you don't want to do that. So I believe that we should preserve it and we should hold it. And I believe that for that reason, I was saddened by the way that matter was handled the other day. I do not fault the gentleman for saying that he believes the airport should be run that way. This is a businessman. And he tests the limits of things all the time. You know, he tried to purchase Rogers Telecommunications in Canada, right? And another big purchase he had in mind the other day, I think that was turned down as well. The Canadian government said no. That for us is a strategic communication platform. We're not going to sell that to anybody. So and you know, he has expressed his views. If he comes and he says he wants Cameroon Park, right? You can't blame him because he says he wants Cameroon Park because he wants to build a hotel. It is for the government to say that is not for sale. And so I don't direct my frustration or disappointment to him. I think that what should have happened there is that I think the Prime Minister missed an opportunity, because there was an applause And that applause was an admission of incompetence.
Yes.
You see, that applause was an admission of incompetence. And I was not happy about that at all. Yeah. I believe that the Prime Minister should have found a nice, subtle way to say to Mr. Savary, well, this is one that we can't go down that road.
Yeah.
In a nice, subtle way. I'm not talking about being disrespectful or abusive, but you signal to him so that the population can hear you defending that project, because they understand that you are their voice, you are their spokesperson, you are the one talking for them in that arena, and therefore they must hear you saying it's important we save in this one.
But Naz, certainly I'm not a businessman at his level, but that kind of, for lack of a better word, that kind of arrogance or testing the limits that business people do, I'm kind of aware of it. It is the reason I feel that the Prime Minister, and I've said that before, did not respond, is that the Prime Minister was aware that that comment was going to be made. I know you might not want to go there, but I am going there. And that this was a trial balloon.
Well, I don't want to go there, not for political reasons, but for legal reasons.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Huh?
So obviously, it was a trial balloon that was set up and to see testing the limits, Anyway, I got a few more questions in terms that let Pablo come back in as it relates to how do you think what do we have to do in terms of a new sort of the way we educate our young people for some of the challenges that you spoke about? So I'm going to come back to that, but I'll let Pablo jump in.
Okay.
Well, Brother John, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Comrade Naz, given the present political climate in Grenada, I know that you have resigned from the leadership of the NDC. Is there any prospect of you returning into frontline politics in the near future? If so, how do you see yourself playing a greater role? Because under your leadership, the NDC had increased the voters under your leadership. What would you do differently now if you get back into frontline politics?
Well, the last question is the easier one.
You can go ahead and break news on GMFM, man.
I mean,
maybe you want to go to New York first to break the news. Because we see people being on local media and they're not breaking news, and then when they go
abroad and break news,
they break the news. You know what I mean? So maybe that's the way you want to go.
Well, I don't want to follow that course, but John, I would answer the question in this way that I say it all the time. One of the most important lessons I took away from the revolution and its fail and its collapse is to avoid the word never. Avoid that word never, because if somebody had told me that the revolution was going to collapse in October of 1983, somebody had told me that in January of 1983, I would say you're joking.
Right. We all were there. Yeah.
I had no idea that this was going down. You understand me?
Yeah.
So you want to realize that we don't accept that we don't really control the future, that there are forces greater than us. And so you cannot speak with this absoluteness and absolute certainty about things. You have to realize that everything is relative. Yeah. And if conditions change, you change. You adapt to the new reality. Yeah.
Right.
So I will never say to you that I will never return to frontline politics, because politics is in my blood. I love politics. I love the country. And I enjoy serving, and I'm happy to serve. Yeah. Will it happen in the very near future? I don't know. The reality is that, I'm getting a lot of calls from many different people asking me to consider my or reconsider my position, you know, and I'm treating with it in an open way. You know, I pray on it because I would like to do what is right. I want to strike a balance at my age between what I do for the country and what I do for my family and myself, you know. So, I mean, I don't have all the energy and drive and enthusiasm that I had when I was 40 years old. Yeah. So, but I feel that I can still make a contribution and I would like to make a contribution. So I'm treating with it in an open way, you know. That's how I can best answer you at the moment. Yeah. But I realize that we have some challenges in the party and in the country as a whole. The young people they have the energy, they have the drive, they have the enthusiasm, but of course they don't have the political experience, you know. And perhaps one of the things that is different from when we were growing up is that I believe, frankly speaking, with no disrespect to the young people, I think that we listened more to our leaders. You know, we were at their feet learning and taking their guidance and direction. I think the young people are much more independent in the way they approach their lives and what they do and their decision making and so on. So they have to learn things through themselves and by themselves. They have to see it before. You can't just convince them by telling them. Yeah. And so I believe that, you know, it's going to be a challenge to get them on board and to strike some kind of a, I don't know, how to unify our experience, our wisdom, if I may say so, on our years of experience with their energy, their talent, their enthusiasm, and their drive. How best to combine these forces, because that is a necessity to achieve our full potential. But it is not easily achieved because the young people, to some extent, they are also distrustful of some of the older folks. They believe that, you know, we don't give them the due worth sometimes when we approach them and how we engage them and how we deal with them. They feel that people talk down to them sometimes, you know, and we feel that they don't listen. So a new kind of compromise has to be reached. It's never easy, but I believe it starts at home as well. You know, you have to talk to the kids. You have to talk to them. It's not just talking down to them or ordering them around, but convincing them through other means. You know, one of the things that, you know, we decided when we had our kids that we would never hit them. You know, we would never hit them, and we live by that. And they grew up, and now they're big men. They've never been hit by anybody, because we felt that there were other ways to teach them and to guide them and to let them learn and to influence the behavior without having to use force against them. You know, so it has to happen at home as well, in relationships, how we talk to them and how we engage them. It's not easy because the teachers themselves are challenged, as you know, Delbert, especially in the United States. You can tell a 15-year-old what to do at school. They don't listen to you. You know.
Definitely.
Yeah. So.
My daughter the other day told me that she had certain constitutional rights and guarantees. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a reality. You know?
No. But you're a numbers guy. So and that issue. And listen, you spoke so clearly and so eloquently about the challenges that we face that I really haven't heard anybody else speak about in that detail, sort of laying out what some of the most important challenges are. So what do we do to bring these young people along? Because as you know, at one time, you know, I was a youth leader, and I agree with you that one, that we listened more. It was a different time. Obviously, I challenged my parents on a lot of things, but there were just some no-go zones that they wouldn't put up with. But we also, in some way, we benefited from an era when there were these great inspiring leaders roaming the Caribbean that we read and listened to and had the opportunity to bump fists with and so forth. Now it's a little different. So what would you say if a promise was to be made to the young people that said something like that we will guarantee you in our next administration, I don't know, 20, 30, 35, 40% of key position or understudy position to make sure that we're helping prepare you for leadership down the road? Because make no mistake, enthusiasm does not always get the job done. Energy does not always. Know-how does. Temperament does. You know, all this.
Of course.
You know, so the idea, and listen, I have a young daughter who is starting college this summer, going into political science and strategic communication, and that's the area that she wants to go in. She wants to go into public service. So, and she thinks she can rule the world already. Okay, what do we do? How do we bring them along? Would a promise like that be good enough? Do we bring them to the table and make sure that they listen to, that the ideas are incorporated into whatever plan is going forward? Because given all the challenges, if we were all of a sudden going to have this youthful government, I'm afraid that we're going to be in even more trouble than we are now, right now.
Well, the last observation that you make, I don't know if I would want to reach the same conclusion, because
your mic is muted, comrade.
Okay.
What I'm saying, Delbert, is this. The revolution, the prime minister was 34 years old.
Yeah.
The deputy prime minister was 34 years old. Many of the ministers of government were in their 20s.
Yeah.
I remember as a permanent secretary going abroad and so on in those days. The people that are sitting on the other side of the table can easily be my grandfather, right?
Yes.
The commissioner of police was 26 years old,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Think of it this way.
Yeah.
The commissioner of police was 26 years old. Huh?
Yes.
And with that government, you were able to build an international airport. You introduced the Marketing and National Importing Board. You introduced the National Insurance Scheme.
Yeah.
We established the Bernadette Bailey School, which is now Happy Hill.
Yeah.
The Hillsborough government, which is well, what is now Hillsborough government, that used to be Junior Second Hillsborough, the Boca Secondary School. We established 2 commercial banks, what is now RBTT and what is now Republic Bank. That used to be, that was GBC, Grenada Bank of Commerce, and NCB, right? You established the Center for Popular Education. You established the Crucial Factor Restaurant. You had State Farms Corporation. You had all these things done in 4.5 years by these young people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it happened at a time when there was no computer in the world, no PC computer, no PC. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. When the Prime Minister was giving a speech, it had to be typed up on a typewriter, using Gestetner machines to grind the copies out, with carbon paper, If you make mistakes, you have to redo the page and do it over, And this government, in that time, without the internet, without cell phones, without satellites, without any of that stuff, was able to do what it did in 4.5 years. All young people, So what I'm saying to you is, it tells you that if young people's energies can be directed, right, the sky is the limit.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? And so it is not enough to simply say to them, if we form the government, we're going to give you X or Y. You have to make them part of the government. You have to make them part of what you're trying to do. You have to make them part of the change, central to the change, because they are the ones that will help to bring the remainder of the young people with them. If you get 15 good youth who believe in what you're doing, then bingo. because that's what you need. People act based on examples and what they see, not what they hear you say.
Exactly.
You know, so I think being part of the decision, being at the decision-making table is going to be important. Right? Being at the decision-making table is going to be important, and being part of that change now. So, but it requires a certain confidence, right? That has to be placed in them in the same way that our leaders placed us in positions of authority and confidence, knowing that we would mess up. Knowing that we would mess up, and they put us there anyway.
Yeah.
You know, I think what was bad about the whole situation, what made the situation so difficult is that, of course, people were armed. And if you give a young fella a toy, he's going to try to experiment with it.
Yeah.
That's just the way life is. You know, these young fellas who are flying the fighter jets and so on and doing this target bombing, they in their minds it's like playing Nintendo games.
It is.
You see, because what they're seeing is the bullseye.
Yeah.
And they're having fun.
And as a matter of fact, the U.S. military uses those war games, computer war games, as part of their training.
Part of the training. Yeah. You see? So what I'm saying is you have to allow for that factor that young people bring something that we don't have, but you have to somehow use the temperament, the judgment, the experience, and so on as the other component, the part that we can contribute, and let them bring the energy, the talent, the drive, the enthusiasm, and so on. How best to combine that is the question you're asking me. It's not an easy one. I don't have an answer for it. I think some of it is going to be trial and error, but it means a necessary precondition for that is going to be openness. You have to trust them. You have to trust them. There's no other way.
Trust. Talking about trust here, Pablo, I just want to ask another question because sometime last year we had one of your party affiliate member here on the comfort zone, and we had asked the question, why not have you return and lead the party? And the answer to us was that there was too much of dirt thrown at you from the Prime Minister Peter and Chester. So for that reason, we can't have you back as the leader. What do you say to that?
Sorry?
I was saying that one of your comrades from the party was on the comfort zone last year, and
I heard what you said. You were asking me what do I say about
that? Yeah.
Well, what can I say about it? I can't say anything about that. I mean, is the expression of an opinion.
Yeah.
So we all have feelings. We all have opinions. If it creates a discomfort or a disquiet for somebody and they express it, then what can I say?
That's just the opinion.
I just want to go on record and say that my two learned and more temperamental buddies were part of that show because they would have had to kick me out if I was on that panel at that time.
But I want to say something.
It made no political sense. It made no logical sense. It made nothing.
I want to say something because you said some of the young people, and Delbert and I and many other persons that we know today have been part of that construct in the 4.5 year period. That we was given responsibility to do certain things, and we just do it because they ask us to do it, and they provide the leadership and the mentoring for it. The strength that they have, the energy that we had back then, the leaders use that strength and give us responsibilities and put us out and say, you go out and do that. I remember not very long ago, we had a conversation, and a young lady said that she was sent to Russia. She's a 20-year-old sent to Russia with 10 men to lead a delegation, and she said to him, what do you saw in us? Well, it was taking the chance and giving the opportunity to serve, And if you messed up, we go fix it. We will help you fix it. We will share. We will look at you and say where you went wrong, and let's adjust and move forward. You know. And I think now looking at the young people, the eagerness to be in frontline parties, they want to be they want to sit at the table now. They want to sit. They're asking for the table. They no longer want to sit on the sidelines. Like we had a time to come at the table. So how do we put them on the table, and what do we do with them when they come at the table?
Well, I think it's not an event; it's a process. You know, you have to engage them and talk to them and win their trust, because now it's a more difficult process to build that relationship. In our day, the older ones were in charge and they set the tone. They tell you this is what is going to happen. Mm-hmm. Now you have to convince them, whether it's your children or your juniors at work or whoever else. You have to convince those guys that what you're saying is right and meets their expectations. Yeah. They're not going along just like that. They'll fight you to the bitter end, So it's a different mindset, right? And I think that, we are all struggling with how this new world in which they grew up, in this new technological revolution that they are born in and they grew up in a world of so many distractions, where they've learned to multitask. I mean, I see my son with plugs in his ears, listening to music and say he's studying.
Yeah.
And like earplugs with music playing, and he tells me he's studying. And now he's completed his study. He was called to the bar in Canada. He's a lawyer. Yeah. So evidently they're doing something that we were not done. We were told, listen, brother, forget the sports and forget this and go and do your work.
Yeah.
Go and do your schoolwork, So it was one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Right? They learn how to treat 3 and 4 different things at a time. And so the way they approach life is different from us and is different from our expectations. Yeah. And it's much more complex than the difference between us and our parents. In other words, that generational difference is much more complex. It's much more multi-tiered and multifaceted. And so how you engage them and reach common ground with them is a much more difficult task. I don't know that I can spell out how that's going to be done. I think you have to treat with that somewhat on a case-by-case basis. Get to know the individual and hope that you can get at least 15 of them, right, to work with and to mentor as young leaders. And let them be the ones that build the bridge between us and the rest of the young people. You may not have a single strategy to deal with everybody. It's a very different time that we live in,
Okay. All right, Pablo, back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I guess that person in the comments section who asked the question whether Mr. Burke is willing to re-enter the political arena and at what level they will have to wait for some time in the future for that answer based on the response that we had from him a little while ago. Okay, so that person will have to wait. There's quite a few people making comments all in support of you, Mr. Burke, and I can tell you the idea of you returning at whatever level is a very favorable one among our viewers and our listeners out there. And I don't know if a poll was to be taken throughout the nation, what kind of response we are going to get from that. But that being as it may, from all of the conversation, let me say to our viewers and our listeners out there, do not forget that you have the option of speaking with us directly. Yeah? You can call us via WhatsApp on 647-922-0179. That's 647-922-0179. Yes, we've spoken about the present situation that exists, and I believe there's lots of sentiments out today. that it's something that needs to be changed. How we go about it is the discussion, and who is going to do it, is the discussion that is ongoing. And a very common line of march, I should say, is that there needs to be some kind of coalition forces, some kind of coalition between the opposing political forces in order to fight, quote unquote, the green machine. What's your take on such a position, and how do you see such a situation unfolding going forward?
Well, one of the things that has struck me is that it is really crucial, if we are going to develop an election strategy, if we are going to develop a winning strategy for the election, or a strategy for that matter at all, for going into the election, it seems to me that it is crucial to conduct a public opinion poll. Yeah? Polls tell stories, and they indicate to people what are people thinking. And I mean, they are not always accurate, but they are very often accurate and can serve as a very useful gauge for people for decision-making purposes. Yeah. Now, for example, people say to me, well, okay, you should go back in the NDC and lead the party. Yeah. Who is saying that? Is it the people from St. George Northeast alone? Is it the people from St. Patrick West alone? Is it only the NDC members? Yeah. Are the young people feeling the same way? Or is it only old people that are saying that? Yeah. In other words, if you conduct a poll, it will tell you who do people want to see as the leader of the NDC. And I'm saying people now, meaning people outside of the base, because you need to know who, in addition to your base, who you will be able to attract if you get the right leader. Yeah. A leader that is more accepting, that is acceptable to the middle ground outside of your base. Who do people want to see as the leader of the NDC? Who do people want to see as the next prime minister of the country? What are people saying about the different constituencies? Who do they want to see run in St. Patrick West? Is it Delbert? You have to have a sense of where this is going. One of the mistakes I think that was made in the early days by some of the political leaders with COVID is that they were not listening to the science. They were letting their political instincts take the better of them. Yeah. And to simply say, okay, we need a coalition. I do believe that would be very helpful. But if you know what people are saying about different people and different political forces, it helps you to determine how the alignment should be formed, how you should choreograph the situation that you want to create to go forward. Yeah. So it seems to me that is critical. Yeah. So, and that is why it is so sad that somebody answers you by saying, well, because of the dirt they threw on NAZIM 5 years ago, we can't use him again. Yeah? It tells you that person is living in another world, to put it very gently. I don't know who it is, but it tells you the person lacks an appreciation of any science, you see, because a sensible approach would be to look at what people are saying today and make a determination. Yeah. Bouterse was in office, he lost the election, and 20 years later he's back in office. My guy in Jamaica there, he ran, the present prime minister was there for about 4 months and then lost the election and then came around, and today is a very popular guy in Jamaica. Yeah? So you can't, in other words, that person has to understand the difference between a photograph and a video. Yeah? That's what they have to do. They have to understand the difference between a photograph and a video. Right? A photograph freezes a moment in time. It's a still shot, right? Whereas a video takes you to trends and watch movement over time, yeah? So if they were able to defeat us, and I'm not making a case for myself, I'm just thinking logically, if they were able to defeat us because they threw dirt on us in 2018. It doesn't mean that they'll be able to defeat you by throwing the same dirt at you in 2023. Yeah. So it means really that that person has to revisit the thinking on these issues, and then perhaps they'll be able to give you a different kind of answer. Yeah. But what I'm not making the case for myself, because I don't know that I want to go back in. I'm just saying it's something that I pray on as people approach me all the time. Yeah. But I think it's very important in answering your question, Pablo, to say, listen, we need to know what people are thinking, right? That will help too, because you see, you may say you want to go as the leader of the party, and you're fighting and you're convinced that you should be the leader of the party. And every time somebody says to you, well, listen, I don't think it's a good idea, Pablo, you feel, well, it's personal, they're trying to fight me down, right? Because in your mind, that's what you want. And you can understand why everybody else don't see it that way, yeah? When in fact, if you do a poll and you realize that 20% says we want a guy and somebody else, 80% say we want somebody, another person, and 1% say they want you, then you have to think about whether or not the party would be wise to put you there, knowing that 1% said yes to you, 80% said yes to somebody else, you see? So they will help the party in its decision-making at different levels to get such a poll done. You see what I'm saying? I believe that some of the questions that we are trying to answer cannot properly be answered if we don't have the scientific tools to really address them, you know? And I believe that information is going to be important. What are the people thinking? What are they saying? What do they want? What are the main issues facing young people? What is it that the young people want today? What is their complaint against us? How can we address it? I was trying to answer a moment ago, Delbert, what should we do about the young people? But I'm trying to do so without knowing what do the young people think of us.
Yeah.
You know, there is need, in other words, to make that kind of inquiry, to get some kind of information to inform what we do and the choices that we make.
Speaking about the young people, I want to return to that momentarily, because reference was made to that era back then when the prime minister was in his 30s. The deputy prime minister was also in his 30s. The vast majority of the other leaders were in their 20s. And mention was made of all that took place, you know, all of the benefits and the development agenda that came with it. And that was because you had these young people of that dispensation, of that era. They were organized in that way. They had a development agenda that they could have hit the ground running when they got into office. They had an institutional framework. They had an institutional construct among themselves. We do not see such a situation really, that kind of cohesion, that kind of cohesiveness among the young leaders of today. Granted that we have a number of them out there on social media who's making some very salient points and presentations and so on, but we haven't seen that kind of cohesiveness and that kind of organizational approach as existed back then. What do you think could be part of the reason for that situation as it exists?
I think part of the reason is our own feeling, my generation's feelings, yeah? Because when I look back, Pablo, you had the generation that belonged to your Gary, your Blaze, your Scipio, your Houston, your John Watts, you know, that group of men that came out of the legislature, 1960s, 50s and 60s as the dominant forces, turn of the century, turn of the decade, 69, 70. They are in the twilight and they're moving on. And at that same time, the next generation emerges on the scene, yeah? Maurice, Bernard, Selwyn Strawn, Keith Mitchell, Tillman Thomas, Francis Alexis, all of these guys who today would be about 75 years old, if they're alive. Those who have died at 69, at 70, Maurice died young, you know. All of those guys became that generation that took the thing from the group before them, yeah? And we were at their feet as young fellas. You know, we were in school, we were at their feet, we were learning from them and so on. I would say this, the group of people that I went to school with, and I don't want to sound arrogant when I say that, the group of people that I went to school with are perhaps the people who were in Form 6A and 6B at that time, perhaps is the most potent group of people that were in Form 6 in any year that I could remember, right? In the 2 6s, yeah? Aaron Moses, Adrian Brzezinski, Rodney Rapier, Angus Smith, Celia Klein, Sandra Ferguson, William Joseph, Peter David, Nazim Burke, Leon Charles, Spencer Thomas. All of us were in class together. Right? Dawood David Mays, who did his doctorate in Islamic studies, okay, in Sudan, and is now teaching in the United Kingdom. Yeah? A generation of people who are Chris de Riggs, Ross. What is Ross' first name again? He's a great author in the United Kingdom. Jacob Ross, and Gray, Osbert Gray. All of these guys were in class together. But that generation, when you look and you ask yourself, so Maurice and them came and they did a revolution. They made a revolution and we were at their feet learning and doing stuff. But then when you ask yourself, what did our generation do? What has our generation done? Like, okay, they passed on and we then came. What have we done? What is the contribution of my generation to the country? Yeah, because every generation has to write its own history and its own chapter in the country's history. Every generation has to write its own chapter. So Maurice and them wrote their chapter. We helped them, right? We helped prepare the footnotes while they were writing their chapter. What is our chapter, right? When I look back, it seems to me that there's some guys who may have done individual things and so on, but as a generation, I do not believe that we have offered anything to the country. And we are going down. In fact, I mean, the truth is, I would have come as the first of our generation that would have taken over one of the major political parties, the NDC, right? What has happened? Most of that generation is still hanging on to the coattails of one of the men in the 70s who has made his contribution for his generation, Keith Mitchell, and we are there. My generation is holding on to his coattails and hoping that somehow history will record that that's what we did. So we have not really made any significant contribution to the country's history. And history will record that what we did was hold on to the coattails of one of the men in the generation before us. And instead of us coming together and trying to do something as a generation, we spend our time trying to pull down each other and beat up on each other and condemn each other and so on. It's so sad, really. You know, sometimes I look back and I'm saying to myself, you know, I mean, it is sad, really. It is sad. Because we history will remember that we did nothing, right? And so Pablo, I'm answering you in that way to say this: we cannot just bypass ourselves and ask ourselves, well, what is that generation doing? Perhaps they realize that we didn't do anything, so they have nothing to do either. You know, we have to find a way to realize that Dr. Mitchell has done his part, right? He cannot now write the chapter for our generation in the country's history. And we cannot write the generation for Ron Reddit and those guys. They have to write it. What we have to do is create the conditions for them to write it. Help them, right? We can't be trying to impose ourselves on them and to hang on irrespectively. And that's why I said at the time, I said, listen, I will step back. and let the party find a leader. Right? I wasn't afraid to step back. Let the party find a leader. If they don't find a leader, then of course we'll talk again. But I'm saying, let's not just blame everybody else. I think we failed. We made a terrible shortcoming, Pablo, in my generation. Too many men with too much talent just sit on cussing and so on. I mean, you know, today I was watching a chat, one of those chat rooms, you know, where there are several people on it. And when I see some of the comments and one man making against another answer, I'm saying, look at this, you know. I hope I never find myself in that situation. That's why I don't comment on these chats. I just watch everything and I don't comment. I don't post anything on any chat. I just watch because I think it encourages a mean spirit in some people. Social media.
Yeah. You mentioned about how history will treat with different era. How do you think history is going to treat with this era in terms of the leadership and the governance that we experience in?
I think Grenada would regret it. You know, I think Grenada would regret it. It's difficult to say, but this country, I've always felt it, and that's what motivated me. This country has so much potential, you know. I believe that this place is unique in so many ways, you know, so much possibilities and so much potential that if we had the right kind of leadership, this country would be an example to the rest of the world. I mean, we just happen to have so many things that are beautiful and are right. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine from Barbados the other day, and she told me Barbados is beautiful. I said, yeah. I said, listen, we live in a country that is made up of 23 islands. Okay. If today I feel like taking a boat and go and rest up on Sandy Island, I go and do that. You can't do that.
Yeah.
The most you can do is go into Jolly Roger and take a ride around, you know, and go back home. So, you know, I'm just saying, the natural attributes of the country are such that we just have so much. And in terms of its natural scenic beauty, there are very few places like this on the planet, you know. And I mean, we have so much, but we have not been able to optimize. We have not been able to maximize the possibilities, you know. And that is what I think. To answer your question, that is where that would be the source of the regret, because we can do so much. I mean, and perhaps Prime Minister Mitchell himself, as he looks back and reflects on his years in office, he'll ask himself whether he got the job done. You know, he became Prime Minister at the age of 49. Today he's 75. Right? He first became Prime Minister at the age of 49. Today he's 75, and he'll have to ask himself, did I get the job done? When I look back on what has happened, I built the stadium, yeah. I built the ministerial complex, but did I get the job done in terms of raising the quality of the human stock of the country, right? What did I do about all the people who are now on Imani? How could I have made them, you know, better trained and equipped to transform the country? You know, how could I have done things differently in his own reflections? I'm sure he's going to have to go through that as well. You know?
I'm glad you go ahead. Sorry, Pablo.
Yeah, one more thing before you come in. Speaking about that and speaking about the questions that Dr. Mitchell may have to ask himself, the NDC and the NNP have been the two dominant political parties over the past so many years. And there's always this conversation about the quality of governance that both parties have really provided to the country. If you had to do a comparative analysis of the two, what will your conclusions be?
It's difficult to say. I think that in its philosophy, the NDC is a better organization. Yeah, I think it focuses a lot on what are the right policies, what are the right principles, what's best for the country. I think the NNP is a more political organization in the sense that the focus is on winning elections and remaining in office, right? They have they've developed a formula, a winning formula, and executing that formula to remain in office, right? When in office, to my mind, they do not achieve the things that really are transformational in nature, that will really change the way we live and the way we do things. They prepare for the next election from the day after the first election. And they've mastered the techniques, yeah? Whereas, I mean, we tend to focus a lot on the philosophy, the programs, and what should happen and how it should be done and so on. And the reality is, if you're not in government, you can't do those things. What winning an election does is that it puts at the disposal of the political organization the resources of the state and the apparatus of the state to carry out its political program. That's really what it is. It puts you in charge. It makes available to you the resources of the state and the apparatus, the state apparatus, so that you can carry out your programs. So before you can do anything else, you must win. And, it means that it requires a different level of pragmatism. Which I think is sometimes missing within the NDC. I mean, here's a guy telling you, I don't want to choose this leader because they threw dust on him the last time. If that is a reason not to choose your leader, then you may get somebody that ain't had dust on them, but you'll be standing up for the next 30 years. Right? Meanwhile, we are throwing dust on Michelle every day. But he understands that his opponents will throw dust at him, but he has to keep marching.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I said it was one question before Delbert come in, but there's one more thing that I want to touch on. I want to bring to the table. We see last year that an organization came into being as an NGO. And they did indicate at the time that depending on how things develop and the reception and response and recommendations from the people will determine how they proceed as they go forward. And we heard recently that at an event overseas, it was announced that that entity will now be developing into a full-fledged political organization, and that should be launched sometime soon. How do you see a new political organization, especially given the individual who is the leader of that movement? And we're speaking here of the Grenada movement, TGM, which is led by Dr. Patrick Cantwine. How do you see and what kind of impact do you see that having on the overall political landscape of the country?
Well, it is difficult to say. I mean, I really would not like to prejudge the organization. I have seen some of the ads and some of the programs that they have hosted, on-air programs. I've seen that. And I think only time will tell, you know. I believe that the more people that come out and speak up against what is going on, the more people that can educate the public and identify the wrongs, the more people that can keep people informed and assist the opposition, the better it will be, because Dr. Mitchell and the NNP has been in government for a very, very long time. And it may well be necessary that the forces who are opposed to Dr. Mitchell and the NNP organize themselves. So we have to approach that, I believe, with an open spirit, identify all the people who are have the potential to contribute towards an opposition force and talk, engage in dialogue and see how there can be collaboration and cooperation. Yeah, I don't think that anyone would benefit from drawing lines in the sand and say, well, I'm not doing this and I'm not going with that and so on. It never works. Yeah, and once the opposition forces are divided, it increases the chances of success of the government.
Okay. Delbert?
Naz, you sort of just touched on one of the things that are considered Dr. Mitchell's accomplishment, the central government office in the Botanical Gardens, something that I've had tremendous problems with over the years. And it sort of ties back into earlier comments that you made about how do we, preserve our green spaces and how do we treat the environment and whether or not the environment is going to be, taken care in our overall development scheme. Now I understand that there may have been some benefits that were gotten from sort of the quasi-centralization of the government. But given what has happened since that time and the entire collapse, the collapse of the rural economy, how would you grade the idea of sort of breaking up the government and placing leading government ministries and statutory bodies located throughout the island to bring some much needed economic activity into those areas?
That would not be my first step. My first step, I think, would be to focus on economic activity and economic projects. Because what the government offices really do is provide services to support the activities that you do, Yes, it would be easier for people, for example, to get their driver's license. They won't have to come in town or those kinds of things at the revenue offices and so. But what you really want to start with is an activity or activities that create employment and then have the services to support those activities. What I'm thinking of, for example, is this. If the government were able to set up the UE campus in Hope, that would have done for St. Andrew and St. Patrick, I might add, what St. George's University is doing for St. George's. Yeah, because the idea was to make that the non-campus territory for all of the OECS countries, right? St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and so on. Their kids would have come to school there. Now, if they come into school there, the support services, the supermarkets, the fresh markets, the foods, the hairdressing salon, the apartment buildings, all the stuff that is now around SGU in the True Blue area and surrounding areas, you'd have a similar kind of setup there, right? In St. Andrew, that will create jobs and opportunities for people. The mere bringing of the government offices or a department or a branch or a ministry there will not achieve that. You're going to have to find something that...
You lost your Naz. Come on, Naz. I think he lost. Get lost in there.
I think he muted his mic.
Yeah. You check your mic, comrade.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Right? I'm just saying, you're going to have to create something like that. And then the government services, whichever ministry or department you bring, will be able to do that. Especially because now, more than ever, government really should be standardizing these services. When I say so, by computers, be logging into offices. Government offices should be computerized centrally.
Yeah.
When you pay a bill in St. Patrick in the Sauters Revenue Office, that should show up in town instantaneously.
Yeah.
and you know, I stay here and I renew my driver's license in Toronto.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you ought to be, yeah, I don't go to Canada to renew my driver's license in Canada. Huh? So you ought to be able to stay in Sotez and renew your driver's license in town.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that the focus has to be on economic job creating sort of activities, rather than the mere decentralization of the ministerial offices as such. I'm not saying that it may not happen, but that would not be my first focus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, any development agenda is going to require that that we educate our people, and there's a skills gap in Grenada. How do we sort of recalibrate our education system? Because it seems to do fairly well in terms of pushing people in on that academic path, but we seem to be lacking in the skills part, in training, quality mechanics, plumbers, all these areas, and now so much of, especially if we are going to get into light manufacturing or even medium scale manufacturing, a lot of the modern equipment now are going to require some additional skills. Something like what Germany has done with their 2-year program with some of the, and I know we don't have that kind of infrastructure in place, but they would have done with companies like Siemens and BMW and Mercedes-Benz, who partner with the government to set up these training institutes to make sure that people who are not, you know, maybe inclined or and again, based on the needs of the country, how are we going to face that challenge? What would you suggest? What would you do to help us better prepare to bridge that skill gap? Well,
I think you have to set up a similar program. You know, actually, we had engaged the government of Switzerland, and they had agreed to work with us to set up a system like that for Grenada. Oh, because wow. The Swiss system is very much similar to the German system. The focus is not on university degrees, it's on the polytechnics. Yes. Where you learn technical skills, so that when you go to school, for example, you'll have to learn, even when you go to high school, you have to learn how to change a washer in your plumbing. You have to learn how to fix the louvers in your windows. You know, they teach hands-on skill. They teach people what they consider to be life skills. Yeah. They're not really life skills, but they treat them as life skills, and you learn how to do certain basic things. And I mean, it is less common to go to university. People go to polytechnic to learn to do something, to develop a technical skill, which they can then use for manufacture and so on, you know. And the Swiss system is the same. Well, you know, Switzerland is half French, half German, you know. Yes. So the system is the same. And we had actually met with them and discussed helping to set up a system like that in Grenada. You know, it's going to be an apprenticeship system. So when somebody comes out of high school, they have the option of going technical, right? Yeah. Something along the Nulo line or the technical wing that used to be in the school at that time. Those who are going academic, they go the academic stream. Those who are going technical, go the technical stream. But what you do is you create people with skill sets. It's extremely important because that's what industry wants. That's what manufacturing wants.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
I didn't know that this was going to be for a couple hours. I thought it was a half an hour program.
All right. Okay. Naz has discovered.
No, I didn't know. I should have asked.
Naz has just discovered the Gem FM secret. Once you sit in the chair, you don't even know time goes, because we don't rush people out of our conversation. We want the people, our audience, to get not a 50 minutes.
I'm not complaining. I'm just saying I didn't know.
You're not the first person. Persons come here and they say that, you know what, how long? And I've been here for the last 3 hours. And it seemed like it was just 5 minutes ago. Because we make people feel comfortable at Gem FM, right, Pablo?
Very nice.
So Naz, you talked about the failure of our generation to better prepare our young people for the challenges. how would you assess, because I know you're somebody who thinks in these large terms, as small economies like Grenada, we were struggling before COVID with all the issues on our table of underdevelopment and climate change and so forth. How would you assess where CARICOM is today, what it needs to do, and how important would genuine regional integration play in the overall development, future development of the Caribbean? And I say this because when I travel the Caribbean, you hear these little, not in my backyard stories. But like and certainly I do, in the North American metropolitan area, we all live together and we all help out each other, and we all, I know I can easily go into a Guyanese neighborhood and get the best roti or good, So we work together here, right? Because of the circumstances. Why have we not been able to use our experience here in North America to forge a greater sense of cooperation and unity among our people and the political leadership in the Caribbean? And what role how would that help us?
Well, the problem from my sense, the problem has never been cooperation and relationships between the people. It's cooperation and relationships between the political leaders.
Yes.
The obstacle is not as between the people. The obstacle is as between the leaders. Yeah. And I believe that perhaps the fundamental problem that is getting in the way is egos. Each individual believing that they have their own turf and that they don't have to answer to anybody else, I mean, I'm the Prime Minister of Grenada. This is how I see it. That's what we're doing. And if you don't like that, too bad for you.
Yeah.
So you don't get the sense that people are prepared to sacrifice for each other, to give up something in order for the greater good to happen, to give up something for the greater good. And I think there might be an objective reason for that. It may have to do with underlying fears that if I were to do that, it may be unpopular, the opposition forces may come against me and I may lose the election. Guys may figure that they're covering the soul. It might be that, I like this, but I mean, who is Raleigh to come and tell me do this or do that and do that? And then, of course, you have the big island, small island difference that has historically existed, So there are different points of tension. And how they manifest themselves sometimes is hard to say. I've been at some of these meetings and I cannot explain what happened.
Yeah.
But I believe that those are some of the challenges. Mind you, it is happening in Europe as well.
Oh, of course.
It happens in other common markets and other unions, where there is always a point of tension between the interests of the state and the interests of the collective. There's always a point of tension. France is going to say, well, no, like we're not giving up on this agriculture. That's where we're going. And Britain will say, well, no, I mean, just a few days ago, I see that the French sent out some warships because, the British sent out some warships because they sent the French fishermen were outside in some area just,
yeah.
These are two countries that have been at war for many years and been friends for many years.
Yes.
But the fact that you mobilize your military is a message you're sending.
Yeah.
We don't mobilize our military against each other,
Mm-hmm.
So the tensions exist.
So we have a new administration in the U.S. That replaced the dumpster fire that was the Trump, whatever you want to call it. I think to call it an administration will be a disservice to political science departments around the world. how do you, given the challenges that the U.S. itself faces, are you hopeful that the Biden administration would approach the Caribbean any differently than previous administration have? And do we have, it sort of ties back to my original point. If we are more united in the Caribbean, would that give us a sort of leg up in terms of how we leverage whatever power or leverage whatever influence we may have from a regional perspective, and in the way that Washington would view the Caribbean?
I don't see that, to be honest. I don't think that that is going to have any serious impact on how the Americans deal with us in the Caribbean. The Americans, as you know, are driven by their own agenda. Yeah, they are doing what they believe works for them. They've carved out the world in a certain way. They see the Americas in a certain way. They're not driven by what we think as much as what they think is important for them. Yeah. The issue that I think we have to deal with now, which perhaps goes to the heart of the new reality that you are pointing to, is the presence of China in the region.
Yeah.
And how the Chinese are engaging with the islands, and how the Americans view the Chinese presence in the islands. Yeah, in it is my sense, based on all that I've experienced to date, that the Americans are very uncomfortable with the Chinese increasing presence.
Yeah.
In the region, and they've expressed some uneasiness about it, publicly and privately.
Yeah.
And
that was my next question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've expressed some unease about it, and I think it's happening all across the world, really. As the Chinese spread their wings, the Americans are concerned that that's their competition.
Yeah.
And they have to put up with it in other parts of the world, in the South China Sea, in the race to Mars, in the race to the moon, and so on. They have to put up with certain things. But I think it makes them very uncomfortable. Even they have to put up with Africa, even, but it makes them very uncomfortable coming into the Caribbean.
How do you?
Again, it deals with that same backyard kind of philosophy,
Yeah. How do you? The BRIC countries. One is technically in our region, Brazil, and what has happened in Brazil, and certainly what's happening in India, and the decline of the decline that's been experienced in the Russian economy. How do you? Because at one, 15, 20 years ago, when that term was coined, it was believed that somehow these four nations was going to emerge as sort of different power centers in different parts of the world. It appears now that may have been put on hold in Brazil, certainly in Russia, and certainly in China. How do you view that emerging tension with Russia and the United States, and certainly what appears to be a breakdown in Brazil, who had 12 to 15 years of great productivity, and that sort of very nationalistic and deeply religious tint to the governance in India?
It is hard to say. I mean, to be honest, I have not considered that Indian scenario sufficiently What I think we can say about Brazil is that much of the international prominence that Brazil enjoyed happened under Lula and the Workers' Party. And as you know, he was incarcerated and so on, although he's now released from prison.
Yeah.
He was released not long ago. But a lot of that came during that period. And after he left and the lady took over the party, the conservative forces basically clamped down on her. She was impeached.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was impeached, and the right wing took control of the country. So I don't know, although there is some suggestion that Bolsonaro is close to Putin, I don't get the sense that that closeness is translating into economic cooperation. It seems as though it's more like a sort of personal
strongman
kind of alliance, you know, yeah. And so I don't know if that will translate into anything. Xi in China I think he's all on his own.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as he's concerned, he doesn't need Brazil. He'd like to have a relationship with them. He doesn't need Russia. He doesn't need India.
Yeah.
Because he feels very powerful. I think they've amended the constitution to give him life term, you know. And you can see he's a very strong-willed guy.
Yeah.
You can see it, you know. And so it's hard to say how that is going to play out. I mean, it's a very critical question you're asking. I have not thought about it very much, but it's something that one should consider because we may have seen the end of the brick.
Yes.
You know, I say may because you don't know how this thing is going to play out in the post-COVID era.
Yeah.
But India will survive. I mean, India will get up again.
Yes.
Brazil has been struggling for a while. The Indians are way ahead especially as far as services are concerned. They have the technology, they have the international linkages, they have all the Indian engineers and so on positioned in some of the best companies in the world, Microsoft and all the other companies, you know, Google. So they are going to bounce back. I mean, there's no question about that. Brazil, I think, is likely to have a harder time.
Okay.
You know, yeah. China is standing on its own feet.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys were actually displaying in the anniversary revolution, displaying spacecraft.
Yeah.
A spacecraft in Tiananmen Square. You know what I mean? So they are going big, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
okay, well, a while ago, you know, Mr. Burke did indicate that he was not aware that we will be having this extended conversation.
Yes,
that's what John Calliste and Delbert Baptiste does, you know. And
yes,
they've drawn me into. At this point in time, I feel it's time that we let Mr. Burke go. We've had it here.
Yes.
For it wouldn't be long to 3 hours anyway.
Yes, thank you very much. I may have to do a couple other things tonight before I sleep.
So it really was a pleasure having you here, and thanks for taking the time off to accept John Calliste's invitation to be here on the Comfort Zone. There's one thing that one of the guests one of the people in the chat room, in the comment section, did say to ask you, what's your take on all of this conversation that's been taking place regarding the issue of the cannabis issue, the fact that we've had that report from the commission that was set up by CARICOM, and we've been having that conversation taking place. Government has been speaking about it. The NDC has published a policy on that. What's your take on this whole thing?
Well, I think it was only a matter of time. It has to happen because that is that is the trend in the world. And, we have always said that it's important if CARICOM sets up a commission of eminent experts and that we partake in the selection of those persons, we must place our trust in them and we must work with their recommendations, So I believe that the government should implement their recommendations. And these countries are going to have to think out how to phase things in what sequence it must be done, and look at the economics of it, I think that's really important, the economics of it, because it may well be an economic frontier in its own right, and these countries have such limited economic bases with which to work that, that may well be the business that replaces the citizenship by investment program, We have to look to see how it can be made into an economic sector in its own right. Quite apart from health benefits and so on, you have to be thinking, how do we, it's not just somebody smoking a joint recreationally. Yeah. How do you convert this into an economic service, an economic opportunity, a commodity that can bring multi-purpose, several byproducts that have medicinal and pharmacological properties that can be used for different things. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So, as we depart, any final words that you want to leave with us? Any thoughts that you want to leave with us?
Only to say
have we drained you for the evening?
I cannot. I am drained, but in a pleasant way. I'm happy that I had the chance to chat with you guys. It's been a long time, and thanks for the opportunity. Allow me to share my views on a few things, share my thoughts. It actually helped me to refine my own thinking, and I was asked some very challenging questions by you guys, and it gave me a chance to reflect. And these things always help you to refine your thinking, and to be in a better position to be constructive as you engage. So I welcome the opportunity, and I want to thank you very much for having me here.
Okay. So thank you very much.
All the best to you guys.
Thankful.
Thank you.
So this is where we bring the curtains down on the Talking Point, the Saturday evening edition of it. It was a pleasure having our co-host Delbert Baptiste as always, and our technical operator, Brother John Calliste. We look forward to the day when he will be back in the seat as the host of the Talking Point program. When the residual impact of the COVID-19 will cease to be, and he will be able to take his place once again as the host of the Talking Point program. Thank you very much to all of you who joined us and who remained with us throughout, for all of your comments and all of your observations in the comment section. I wish you all of the best for the rest of the weekend, and have a blessed and productive week.